So before we get started, I'm going to introduce our speaker today, Sean Fitzpatrick. He is the CEO and President here at TalentMap. He has quite a vast experience in the employee engagement world and specifically within colleges and universities. He spent over 20 years working alongside colleges and universities to improve employee engagement, and it's a great opportunity for us today to have him here to share with us on employee engagement. So let me start by welcoming Sean. Sean, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
Looking to understand a little bit more on how to improve employee engagement within the academia sector. And so Sean today is actually going to be talking on a lot of different topics today, touching on a few points. And hopefully this will be something that you guys will be able to share and take back with you guys in your workplace. So thanks, Sean.
Good. Thanks, Neil, and thanks for the opportunity to walk through a bit of an overview on what we're learning from working with colleges and universities across the country. Before I do that, I just got one or two slides just to explain who we are as an organization. I know some of the participants on the phone today are organizations we've worked with in the past, but there is also some organizations that we haven't worked with, so it's always good to just do a bit of a refresher. Just a little bit of background. As an organization, we've been at this area of employee engagement, I guess, for well over 12 years, probably coming closer to 14 years. And our whole focus is on helping our clients measure engagement, and we work on a couple of key sectors. Education sector is one of our key sectors we work on. We also do entry surveys about new hires, how to orientate and get them on board quickly, as well as exit surveys around departing employees. And a big part of our work, of course, is helping our clients act on the survey data, and that's a little bit about what I'll be talking today and some of the challenges of acting on survey results within education, college, university sectors. Just other tidbits of information. We run hundreds of surveys each year, so it gives us a really good sense of what's going on across the country in engagement, in fact, across North America now. We also are the back end, or have been the back end, for Canada's Top Employer program. I've been doing that for 4 or 5 years, so we collect and report the survey data. That gets in the Media Corp and as part of the Best Employer program that gets published in Maclean's and the Globe and different journals and newspapers across the country each year. We recently, about a year ago, we published a book, Employee Engagement for Dummies. Copies of that book is available. You can email us in and we'll send you a copy of the book. We're coming out with a second version of that that's focused not just on engagement but on action planning. And we have offices across the country. So a little bit of background about who we are as an organization. In terms of, just to give you a bit of a sense of the types of organizations that we've worked with, you can see we've had a chance to work with a range of organizations in professional services, public sector, and so on. The academic sector is down on the bottom left-hand side, just to give you some of the organizations that we've had a chance to work with. Athabasca University, Carleton, Concordia, McMaster, are some of the universities. On the college side, things like Reeve College, Emunata Group, Northern Lights College, and so on. So we've had some interesting exposure to the different college and university sectors, and that's what I hope to share a little bit about in the next 25, 30 minutes over this webinar. Now let me jump right into a bit of an overview here. In terms of whenever we work with an organization, we typically walk through 7 core steps of any survey deployment. And that steps from prepare for action to develop the questionnaire, pre-survey communication, deployment analysis, clarifying results, and action planning. What I'm going to focus on today is the very first step, and that's preparing for action. It's one of the areas we find that within the university and college sector that we underestimate the work that needs to be done on the front end prior to the survey. And that's really what I want to focus on. What can you do to ensure greater success on running an engagement survey and driving higher engagement? And one of the biggest things is to ensure that you take the time up front. And I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by that. So one of the biggest challenges within any particular college and universities we find today, and this is not probably just specific to the college and university sector, is the lack of action as a result of the survey process. So what we find is a lot of organizations are good going out, designing a very good questionnaire, particularly in the college education sector, collecting the data, reporting the data, but getting academic staff and departments as well as the administration staff to use the data to drive action is probably one of the biggest gaps that we see in ensuring success in improving employee engagement today. So that's the area I do want to focus on. And I guess if I looked at why is that the problem? Why do we have problems acting on the survey results? And what we've learned over the years is two things. One is we start at the wrong end, and I'll explain what I mean by that. We often start at looking at and designing the questionnaire first, and that's the wrong place to start. We should be starting on action planning first, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. So one of the biggest problems is we start at the wrong end of any survey process, and that can be changed quite easily, but you need a framework to do that. The second challenge is we fail to take the time to get buy-in of the particularly 2 or 3 of the most important stakeholders. The leadership of the administration, so the president's office. We failed to get proper buy-in and full involvement of the senior leadership team on the admin side. And we also failed to get proper academic staff involvement and input. We do get that. We see that in surveys that are run, but we underestimate how important those 2 groups are in terms of involvement. Union involvement usually goes fairly smooth, but that's another area. I'm not going to touch on that today, just don't have time, but that's another area that's important to be aware of. So let me just give you an example of what I mean. What we're looking at here is a very standard timeline that one of the larger Canadian universities used to launch their survey. And I was able to get a hold of this timeline, and I was able to evaluate it with the survey lead there. And a couple of interesting things. When you look at how this timeline's laid out, phase 1, survey preparation. Phase 2, communication planning. Survey administration. And then data analysis and reporting. The last step is post-executive action planning session. So from a first glance, you would look at this and say, well, that's a fairly good timeline. But what it really lacks is the fact that action planning is almost like an afterthought, and all of the focus of this project and this timeline is around the administration of the survey, questionnaire design, HRIS, communication, analysis and data collection, and then finally they get down to the fact that, hey, we got to pay attention to what's going on at the executive with respect to action planning. And that's what I mean is we often start at the wrong end. We should be starting at the action planning, not at survey design. And that's one of the biggest problems we often see is because, particularly in the academic environment, surveys are used often by academic researchers, particularly in the social science area. And there's a lot of knowledge and understanding or around surveys. So the first thing is let's look at the questionnaire. What we've seen as being more successful is let's not look at the questionnaire, but let's start on action planning first, and then we'll eventually get to the questionnaire. Let me explain how to start on action planning first. So whenever you run a survey, and when we run it in the education sector, these are sort of some of the common needs that we see within the sector. So we need to establish a clear need for the program. You can't, great if human resource wants to run a survey, but it has to have a clear business needs. And here's some of the most common themes that we see why universities or colleges run surveys. They want to create some measurement, and they want to use that measurement yardstick as a tool to create change. So there's a sense that you need to create change in the organization, and the survey is a catalyst for that. And that's fine, that's good. Sometimes they want to have more evidence-based decision making. You need data to help make decisions as to what programs, initiatives, people strategies that would make most sense. And getting data and surveys is a very systematic way and cost-effective way to do that. So that's great. A couple of other things, often, how do you create people buy-in? A survey can be used to create buy-in and create support to moving forward on change. So these are some of the most clear needs that people establish for a program. But the problem is to get to the needs, what we need to do is understand who, what, and how of the survey before we get to the why. So the why is important, and a lot of times when you ask universities, they'll say, well, or colleges, all of the above. These are all good reasons why we're running the survey, and that's good. But what we really need to understand is how to actually drive that change so you do have the action planning buy-in up front. So when I talk about starting with the end in mind, here's 4 key components that we recommend our clients start with before they even get into survey design. So the very first component is thinking about who do you want to influence? Who is this survey designed for? One of the easiest ways to think about it is it designed for the CEO and the senior leadership team, and it's really an opportunity to get a sense or a pulse of the organization? Or is it designed for departmental leads? Or is it designed for frontline staff and frontline managers so they can act on a local level? So again, thinking through what the purpose of the survey is and who it's designed for will affect how you actually design the survey. So again, knowing who the design is for allows you to really understand who your primary customer is. You know, often if it's a sensing for the president, you're going to design questions that are enterprise-wide or corporate-wide. If it's for individual department heads, you want to get those individual department heads involved so the language and the specifics of the question resonate with the academic heads and the department heads, whether it's on the administration or the functional side. So who do you want to influence? That's probably the most important thing, and we don't recommend trying to influence everybody. You need to think more 80% of it's for the CEO or the president and 20% is for managers, or is it 80% for the department, local level, and more 20% for the president? So thinking about it in not black and white, but in scales of gray helps you understand who you want to influence. Again, the next thing you want to do before you get into survey design is what are some actions that you want them to take? So is it, if it's at the president level or the executive level, what are some actions that you would expect to come out of the survey? So this is thinking beyond today and thinking once the survey is done, do you want survey action completed at a local level? Do you want it an enterprise-wide? Do you think there's an issue with compensation and you want to understand that better? Or do you think there's more teamwork issues between departments? So understanding what actions you want them to take and what areas within the organization really helps understand how to better design the survey. Universities and colleges are quite large organizations, and they have lots of things going on at any given time. So what's critical is to think about how your survey fits in with the rest of the ecosystem. What else is going on inside the college or university that you have to embed the survey or put context around the survey? Are there other manager or leader evaluations going on, like performance appraisals? Maybe you have another survey running on diversity or health and wellness. Maybe you have some stakeholder feedback surveys running. Those are some of the things that you want to think about, and you want to then design the questions so there's not overlap or your redundant questions that you're asking in some of these other questionnaires or other ways you're collecting feedback within the key stakeholder groups in the university. Two other things you want to look at is the rhythm. What's your annual cycle? Do you often get your managers together once or twice a year? And if you're bringing your managers together to discuss the business and the strategy and review the upcoming plan for the university or college, how can you build your survey as part of that process so that the results are ready when the management team gets together in the fall or in the spring? And that allows for a very effective ability to share information. So thinking about the rhythm of your planning process annually within your university or school and how that might work. And then the last thing to think about is how much change do you want to take on? A survey is really a catalyst for creating change in an organization. If you really cut it down to what are you trying to do, you're trying to get some kind of change initiative going, and the survey is a tool to help leverage that. What you want to be thinking about is, are you trying to just evolve some of existing programs and make some tweaks to what's out there? Or are you using the survey to create radical change in terms of the way the business operates and the way the organization operates? So those are some of the things that you want to think about within any organization, but particularly we find that within colleges and universities, you want to jump to the action first, not the survey. So to put a little bit of a summary here, what this diagram shows is you sort of think about before you launch the survey, if everything went perfect with the survey, what will the change be? You know, what parts of the business will be different? Will it be more corporate initiatives, or will it be specific departments you're trying to influence and you want to see some change there? How will the student experience be different? So these are some of the things you want to be thinking about in terms of the survey. What business outcomes will change? You know, is it we're going to be a lot more innovative or a lot more collaborative? And what does that look like? So thinking through after the survey and after you've got the data, who's expected to enable the change and who's accountable? So those are the things that you should be thinking of before the survey. Once you have sort of thought through some of those, that translates into the type of action response that you anticipate taking based on the survey. And that action response, whether it's local level, executive level, departmental level, whether it's on one geographic area or another, that dictates then the type of analysis and the type of questionnaire you have to design. It dictates the type of reporting that you should be thinking about and putting together. And then that finally drives the item design or the questionnaire design. So that's a very different way of looking at how to be effective of driving change, in that starting with action planning first, working backwards through analysis and reporting and then the questionnaire, as opposed to starting with the questionnaire and then trying to get to action planning. So I'm going to just touch on briefly, how do you actually go about doing a little bit of that? And one of the most effective tools we find is to run some stakeholder surveys at the beginning. And this is before surveys, interviews rather, or discussions. This is before the survey, before the action planning. And basically what you want to do is sit down with the president, each of the executive vice presidents, each of the department leads, and really try to understand the overall environment and with the college or universities operating in. What are the current business challenges and business needs? Is it student engagement? Is it alumni or donor contributions you're trying to drive more? What are the key things? And then how does that tie into your people strategy? Once you understand the big picture, then the individual department needs, and then the relevant people strategy, that's when you start to connect to the survey. So you don't start with the survey, but you start with the business. So these are some questions that we encourage you to have. It's a bit of an interview roadmap. And this interview roadmap allows you to sit down with each of the executives and each of the faculty leads or academic leads that make sense in your organization, and to ask them a series of questions. And typically there's about an hour interview prior to any survey design, prior to any launch of the survey, when you're thinking that this might make sense. And basically what you want to do is ask, of course, a little bit of background about that key stakeholder, expectations for the survey process, find out about what surveys they may have participated on in the past and what that experience has been like. Often you might have an executive VP or a faculty lead that's participated in an engagement or job satisfaction survey or something of that nature in the past and had either a very positive experience or maybe a very negative experience. So understanding that individual executive and how they might perceive an initiative like this is critical to ensuring you understand how to drive change after the survey results are in. What's the business environment look like? Overall, what the performance of the school is doing relative to other schools, what the vision is for the school. Understand the departments. How are there unique characteristics in each department? What are the critical business metrics of each department? What do they pay attention to from a management and key performance indicator side? And then think a little bit about, within each of that department, what do you think engages or frustrates people the most? How is performance managed? What are some of the biggest challenges managers face? Is it recruiting people? Is it engaging people? Is it retention? Is it sick time? What are some of those challenges? And then finally, we can start to connect, once we understand the business, the department, and the people side of the thing, we can start to connect what strategies and actions they expect to take, and that allows us to connect it to the survey itself. So that's the interview questions that we find work very effectively to drive change in the organization. So that's a little bit around the importance of starting at the right end of the survey, and when I call it the right end, that's starting with action planning and not with questionnaire design. Now I'm going to change the pace a little bit. The other thing that we do fall short on is we fail to get good buy-in or very strong buy-in from the leadership team as well as from the academic staff, sometimes from union, but I don't have time to focus on all three. I'm just going to touch on the leadership and how to create better buy-in at the leadership level. If I have time, I'll touch on the academic staff, but I think I might not have time, so I'll see how we go through this. So let's talk about leadership buy-in. How do we create better leadership buy-in? Well, one of the biggest things is to ensure that your leaders understand what you're trying to measure. What we find often is a lot of managers and executives in universities and colleges, although they may have been familiar or have heard of the term around employee engagement, they really don't understand the underlying psychological constructs of what an engaged employee is and what it looks like. So I think what we've noticed, it's very important to spend time to educate the leadership team as to what employee engagement is, how you're going to measure it, and why you're measuring it that way. What we find in universities and colleges, they're a very sophisticated workforce, typically very well educated. A lot of them have a very scientific bent to how they look at things, and of course, I have a very critical eye in how they look at things. So taking the time to help them explain and understand what is engagement and how it's different from what they might be familiar with in this case might be job satisfaction. And taking that time and explaining, for example, what we've seen, job satisfaction is really focused on what employees get, where employee engagement is much more focused on the willingness for employees to give back to the organization. And it's a measure of that energy, persistence, enthusiasm towards the organization, which is very different from job satisfaction. So ensuring your executives understand how and what they're measuring and taking the time to educate them will pay off in the long run. Other things you should be thinking about is really how do you explain to the executives what they should be focused on. And what we find, one of the most effective tools, particularly in a college and academic setting, is using data and facts. Managers, particularly in that environment, seem to respond very well to other research studies, other scientific approaches to this. So making sure that you go through and you find the appropriate studies that support what you're trying to do. So for example, I just identified some of them here. When you looked at some of the proof of why employee engagement and staff engagement in a college or university is important is because it drives improvements in a couple of key business metrics. It drives student engagement, it drives productivity, of staff, both admin and academic, better attendance, lower or better retention, greater alumni involvement if you have highly engaged workplace. So there's a lot of real positives that will speak to the leadership and the president of the different academic environments. So understanding and presenting data is a very good way to get their buy-in within these environments. Other things that's really critical, ensuring that they understand the model of what you're trying to measure and why you're trying to measure it. This is a model that we've used with different colleges and universities in the past. We're trying to measure employee engagement, which is at the top of the pyramid, and the pyramid is loosely based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the bottom is the leadership team and some of the key things employees expect in the workplace. They expect to be paid fairly, have a safe work environment. They expect to have some kind of feedback, have professional growth opportunities. They expect to socialize and be able to learn and have some kind of balance, and then have some focus on student or customer service and have some focus on innovation. So these are sort of a typical model. So ensuring that the executive have seen this model, understand what they're measuring, and start to understand what some of the action plans might result based on the types of questions. This is a very good model that we've used with different colleges and universities, and it starts to help understand and connect the dots for the executive. Again, the executives are busy. They've got lots of outside stakeholders that they're paying attention to. They're not always paying attention to what we pay attention to on the human resource side. But we think about some of the things that they're looking at. They're looking at the reputation of the organization. They certainly want to get high quality applicants. So if you think about it and they want to keep on budget for their financials, these are some of the things that the executive pay attention to on the right-hand side of this chart. On the left-hand side are some of the things that we pay attention to in HR. We think about leadership, we think about management, compensation, feedback. All of these are the things that we pay attention to, but we don't always speak the same language as the president or the president's office or the academic staff. So what we're trying to do in something like this is show how the dots connect to each other. So if you're looking on the right-hand side of this, you want to look at the reputation of the school, the quality of the applicants. Well, one of the things that drives that is, of course, student engagement. And for example, the NESE scores of all the universities and colleges across Canada get measured and rated against each other. And the student engagement really does help drive better applicants and better reputation. So you want to design services that are really designed to meet the target type of students that you're going after. And you want to engage students because that leads to better referral. More and more now is the social media impact of what your students are saying on social media about their involvement in the university. Alumni involvement, donor contributions, these are other things that you want to ensure that you have, and student engagement drives all of that. Well, to get to student engagement, we need to make sure we provide a very good external service value for them. So what's the value proposition for them? And to get to that, part of that value proposition is how they interact with the administration staff as well as the academic staff. So what you want to do is create an environment where, of course, there's great productivity, great staff retention, great engagement of the staff. And how do you get to great engagement? And that's by understanding what the staff look for in terms of a great place to work. And that's what our pyramid does, is be able to show what a great place to work is by looking at how each college or university stacks up on things like student focus, teamwork, professional growth, performance feedback, and so on. So this is a great tool. We find if you can share something like this, now your survey might have different components in here, but the key thing about it is understanding what you're measuring in the survey, which then drives internal service quality in people, how staff perceive the quality of service that's delivered so they can do their job well, which then drives engagement and staff retention and productivity, which then drives student engagement and then drives business outcomes that are positive for the organization. I'll give you an example. Here are two NESE components, and most of you, or if not all of you, are familiar with NESE and the National Student Engagement Survey. In terms of two things that are measured in the NESE is campus environment and experiences with faculty. So in the campus environment, the quality of interactions, is it a supportive environment? And then faculty is student-faculty interaction, effective teaching practices. Just looking at one of the Canadian universities across the country, on their action plan based on their NESE results, they had lots of work being done around ensuring that they set up their first-year students for success. And these are some of the things that they did. They set up an online registration guide, student success workshops, days of service, and so on. Very good in terms of, you know, supporting first-year students. But when you looked at what are they doing to ensure the experience with the faculty was effective, they had no real specific actions identified that's publicly available. So it's interesting in that although the NESE is driven in part by experience with faculty, very few universities will take the time and put in engagements in place that help drive a better work environment for faculty so they can provide a better environment and interact with their students to drive student engagement in a real positive way. So academic staff input and involvement is the last component I want to touch on, and I'm just going to check my time. I've got a few more minutes just to keep everyone on track here. And let me just touch on a couple of things that we've noticed on academic staff and input and involvement. Typical university survey team might look something like this. Whenever we put a project team together, you got the survey lead. Hopefully it's an executive. Often it's the executive vice president of HR, project management. Then you might have a key stakeholder. It could be an academic representative, could be a union representative, internal communications to make sure there's constant messaging, consistent messaging, and maybe HRIS for the database and we get the right people in the survey process and so on. And then what we find is we often underrepresent who should be on this team on the university side. Here's what a real effective team, survey team should look like. Yes, you should have your survey lead. It should be an executive of the organization, and often it is HR. Project management should be the same, but what you should also have is much broader academic representation on this survey team. So we usually recommending having academic representation from the largest academic group, so whatever your largest faculty is, as well as the one that's most reputable. So the one that seems to be most noted for in the college or university. So having academic representation, so department leads, department heads on the survey team or survey committee, that's critical to ensuring buy-in, and also ensuring that you have a non-HR administrative rep. So maybe chief operating officer, maybe CFO, someone that is not on the HR side. So they can also ensure proper buy-in in the admin side to the process. So one of the things that we recommend is ensuring you have much broader representation on the survey team when you're putting the initiative together on the academic side and on the administrative side. The other critical thing that we recommend to ensure academic buy-in is that you make sure that you have some kind of acknowledgement from PSYOP, which is the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychologists. What you'll find is within the academic environment, most academics in the human resource, business side, people management side, psychology side, are aware or are often active members in PSYOP, which is Society for IO Psychology. So what you want to do is ensure any involvement of a survey certainly has some kind of involvement from a PSYOP member, whether it's an internal person at the university, and that you can often find them in the psychology department or in the business department or the human resource side of the academic side, or an external vendor that has PSYOP appeal. And the reason is because PSYOP is really measuring and approaching the workplace from a very scientific point of view, and that appeals to the academic side. What often you get is a cynical academic because they feel that the survey is not put together in a very structured, scientific way, and ensuring you have involvement or buy-in from the PSYOP group, I think, or someone involved that has PSYOP experience, can go a long way to ensuring better buy-in on the executive side and the academic side. A couple of other things. What we find is ensuring when you go to run a survey within any college or university that you take the time to educate the academic staff about the psychometrics of the instrument. When I talk about psychometrics, there's some standard measurements of validity and reliability of any survey, and if ensuring that you have those papers and you circulate those papers out to the academic staff, particularly the academic leads that are on the survey team, but also the other academic faculties, heads and department leads. And the reason is they're going to be familiar with the terms and methodology, even though the administration may not be all that familiar with Cronbach's alpha and different measures of statistical reliance. The academic side is very aware of these. So showing from a HR side that you've thought through the importance of reliability, the importance of validity, and you actually have a science-backed instrument, again, will go a long way to ensuring effective buy-in of the academic staff. And then finally, what we find too, and just to wrap up here in the next couple of minutes, is to show the academic staff as well as the administrative staff some sample reports. Here's what a report could look like, showing them the reports ahead of time, while even before the survey's design, will help them start to think about the type of actions that they might want to take or could expect to take, and the type of survey that they might want to design or expect to design. This is just a sample of one of the reports we provide, or one of the slides that we provide in an executive report. It shows, for example, on the left-hand side, all of the survey topics asked in a particular survey, and then it shows each department. I just put in here admin A, admin B, department A, department B, and so on, and whether that group is above or below a particular norm or average. So that allows the different department heads to see where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are. So these are some of the things that we find is very effective, is showing your managers and showing your department leads and the academic side what the reports will look like. If they see what the reports look like or what the reporting structure will be, then they're more likely to be able to understand the types of actions that they will probably take. This is another example of just how we report out in different universities and colleges. You'll see you get an overall executive report for the big picture of the college university, and then we break it down by the different admin groups, the different departments or functions or geographic locations, whatever makes sense. And whenever we work with our clients, we also give them online access so they can drill and slide into, analyze the data that the way they want and make sense. So just to wrap up, and I just want to summarize sort of what I hope to try to get across today. Surveying and employee engagement is a very big issue, and there's a lot to cover off, and I know it's hard to cover a lot off, and I tried to rush through this material. One of the things that we find within engagement in college and university, the biggest thing that comes out of the survey are opportunities for professional growth. So not surprised, very well educated, educational, academic environment. People, both the academic side and the administration side, want to learn and grow professionally, want opportunities to grow their careers and their jobs, and we see that as often the #1 driver of the analysis when we do the analysis. Interesting though, the #2 driver is on senior leadership. It's around, do we have a vision, and do we understand where we're going, and do we understand how our department fits into the bigger picture of the college or university. Those are the two areas that come out as the most important drivers for most organizations in the college university sectors. Now, different ones will differ depending on the strategy of the different organizations out there, but that gives you some of the sense of what we see as the key drivers. So just to summarize, so biggest challenge is lack of action in academic environments. And one of the reasons why there's lack of action is because often we start at the wrong end. We start right from the survey design, and we should really be starting with the action that you want or need to take. And start with who's responsible, how much action are we going to take, and where are we going to take it? At the executive level, mid-management level, front line, where's the focus going to be? And that's really critical, because that helps then think through all the business issues before you get to the design issues. You think of the business issues, which think of the potential actions you're going to take, which then influences the type of analysis and reporting you're going to do, which then drives the actual questionnaire design. And then the last thing is we fail to take the time to get the proper buy-in at the executive and faculty lead level. And what we'd like to see you do is take more time, spend more time interviewing, talking with, and in particular, listening to your key stakeholders, both the administration and the academic leaders, about what their obstacles are, what their concerns are, what their challenges are. That helps go a long way to creating buy-in, but it also helps you build a better understanding of how to design an action planning when you understand the individual businesses. And then the other thing is, academic environments are very science-based, fact-based environment, or they like to think about themselves often in that. So using data, using facts, and using survey instruments that are designed scientifically and supported by organizations like PSYOP is going to go a long way to ensuring that you have a proper, rigorous process that then allows you to drive proper engagement within the organization and when in the college setting or university setting. So for takeaways, I guess what I'd like to see you guys take away from this is, for those who run a regular survey at your university or college, maybe look at your program now. Do you begin with the end in mind? So when you're launching your survey, whether it's this fall or next winter, do you begin with action planning and work backwards, or do you often begin with the questionnaire and work from there? So what I'm trying to encourage you to do is work backwards, think about the action you want or you need to take, where you're going to take it, who's going to build it, and then build the action response, the analysis, the reporting, and then finally the questionnaire in that order. And then for those who are looking to engage your leadership on maybe a new engagement process, employee engagement process, first of all, help them understand the need for staff engagement. Don't assume that the leaders in the administration side or the academic side understand what engagement is or understand that there's even a need for it. So make sure you take the time, read what's out there in the academic environment and in the journals, human resource journals. Educate yourself so you can educate your leadership team on what staff engagement. And then the second thing is, help your executives and faculty leads connect the dots. Even if they think that it's important, they don't understand how to connect those dots from how what you work on in the HR level drives student engagement and ultimately business results for the college or university. So I'm going to wrap up there. There's a couple of questions it looks like that came in, so we're going to just spend a few minutes addressing the questions. I'll turn it over to Neil, and Neil, maybe you can identify one or two of the questions that came in. I think we have time for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Sean. Yeah, I'll start with a couple questions. We just had a few that came in. Someone was suggesting that this process can sometimes be difficult to sell to an executive team or to pitch the idea. It's just sometimes in the academic world it's a little bit more cynical. So how would you suggest to them to help them get past this?
Yeah, that's a good point. Budgets are always constrained in the university sector, college environment, educational sector. So one of the things I think, and that sort of touches on what I referred to in there, is using data. One of the things that is often misunderstood is the cost of turnover. If you were to lose a faculty member, a researcher, an admin staff, the cost of turnover in the education environment averages about 1.5 times salary. So if someone's being paid, let's say, $70,000 or $80,000, to lose that individual, the cost to the college or university averages about $100,000, $120,000 to replace that individual. That's lost productivity, impact on student engagement, impact on the team, recruitment costs, hiring costs, transfer costs. All of those things add up. So helping the executives connect the dots, taking a look at your turnover, for example, and saying, hey, we lost 5 people last year to voluntarily left us to go to another university or college, not on retirement. How much did that cost us? And if you could save one of those people or 2 of those people, the return on investment on an initiative, whether it's in-house or through an external provider, will far outweigh the cost that you might have to budget for something like this. So the business case is there, but you do have to take the time to build it because it's not a direct link.
Great. So obviously there is a financial return on that as well. Someone else had a question about budgets. So they're saying that their school is currently seeing pressures on their budgets. Wondering if there's any types of creative ways to approach executives to maybe possibly see a survey launched in the future. How would you go about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And one of the things here at TalentMap that we're doing is we're starting to work with different consortiums or groups of colleges or universities, particularly in the college sector more now than universities at this time, and putting together shared services. So you have different colleges all participating in a common survey and sharing the cost of setup, survey design, some of the reporting costs. So all of those setup costs are going to be shared across 5, 6, 7 colleges, all different independent organizations. So, you know, they're going to have their nuances, and we can make some slight customization, but that allows them to get involved with something like this in a real professional, scientific, rigorous way, but at a lot more cost-effective than if they were to just work with a vendor directly. So that's a good question.
Good, and we just have one more. Speaking directly to the correlation between faculty engagement and student satisfaction, could you talk maybe a little bit further on how much of an impact that really does make towards students?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have the stats right in front of me, but there's been some interesting studies done linking educator, teaching or faculty engagement in not just college and universities, but in both elementary, high school, and post-high school environments, showing amazing information around highly engaged teachers and highly engaged faculty change significantly the academic outcomes and engagement of students. And to this point of the problem is it's a long-term impact. So you do the engagement now, but the impact of these students over a long period of time is harder to measure because it's longitudinal. But the impact has been very, very significant. And there's some interesting research, and we have copies of that if anyone wants copies of the research we have there around showing the linkage between the two. But it is significant, and it's very, very interesting from a business point of view.
That's great. Yeah, thank you very much, Sean, for sharing. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Appreciate you always taking your time out of your day to join us. In follow-up, if anyone is interested in any of this research, we will be sending out copies of the webinar that has just been recorded, and in follow-up we'll also see if anyone is interested in any of that additional research. So just keep an eye out for that as well. And again, thank you, Sean, for taking the time to talk to us today. And hopefully everybody here has found all this information relevant, and hopefully it's something that you guys can take back with you. If there's not any more further questions, I guess we can just wrap up here. Thanks again, Sean, and appreciate you all for joining us.
To contact us, or to learn more, just Google TalentMap, or simply click on the link below.